Should you move to Vancouver in 2024? I have lived here for 7.5 years now. I'm still here, so if that tells you something, then there you go. During those years I've been here, I've also made a lot of videos about the city. I'll link a playlist above. It covers weather, it covers how much it costs to live here, all my life hacks. Honestly, just like a lot of Vancouver stuff, I'll link that playlist up there. And also that's what we do on this channel, share a lot of what the city has to offer, as well as everything real estate related, which you can use us and me as a resource by finding my email below this video. And now let's get into why some people do end up leaving Vancouver. Number one is Vancouver's cost of living. And a very short way of saying why it's kind of an issue is because Vancouver has higher than average expenses than everywhere else in the country, aside from Toronto, which is pretty similar, but we have on average lower than the rest of the provinces and cities. So higher expenses and on average lower salaries per year. And so what this leads to is in Vancouver, say you want to make around this much money to live a comfortable life. Let's say it's 80,000, 100,000, something like that. The average is a lot lower. Once you get to this level, you can kind of experience everything Vancouver has to offer. And that's when it becomes honestly like a great place to live. If you're not quite there, sometimes you don't get to experience everything it has to offer. Now, Vancouver has a lot of things that are free, like the nature and the outdoors, but you also want to do stuff that's paid sometimes, like events. Like I said, I'll link a video above and below as well. That's how much it costs to live here per week or per month. And so once people have lived here for X amount of time, they start saying, hey, you know, if I made 65,000, but I lived in Calgary or something like that, I could actually have this or a nice car, or I could put more money away for potentially a home one day. And it's kind of like people start to do a lot of comparing to other places because it's so expensive here. It's hard to not think like that unless, which is what this whole video is, deciding that, you know what, the positives of living here, because I love hiking and I love biking and I love the ocean and I love skiing, are worth some of the negatives. Essentially what this point means, the cost of living being high, is that sometimes I tell people if you want to live here, for most people, the money does have to make sense to a certain extent, especially if you're someone who puts a lot of value in financial strength, your own financial strength and well-being. So sometimes for people, it comes down to you either make a lot of money and you stay and you have a good life here, easier said than done, or with where you're at currently, you move somewhere else to see if you can increase that quality of life. Money does not always buy happiness, but it certainly buys you the groceries and, you know, the other stuff and activities, events, fun things that you want to do. Number two is the barrier to entry to own a home in Vancouver. So in Canada, if you didn't know, if you buy a property over $1 million, you are required to do a 20% down payment. So you buy $1 million property, you need $200,000 cash to give to the bank, to give to the lender. That's the rule. You could buy a property, of course, for less than $1 million. And at that point, you don't need to do a 20% down payment. You could do less, but if you don't do a 20% down payment when buying a property, you then have to pay mortgage insurance. So that is now an extra expense over the long run that you're paying more money for. But it can help you get into home ownership. That's why it does exist. The reason this does cause some people to leave is because owning a property is kind of like the North American dream a little bit. You grow up, you get a job, you get the house, and now you have a yard and the white picket fence and all that kind of stuff. Everyone's future looks different and what they want. But if you own a property, you get to do whatever you want and you don't have a landlord. You can do some renovations and all the positives. But most importantly, it's an investment, and that's something that's a very safe and strong investment, like here in North America, especially Vancouver, because if you own, then house prices go up and you just make money for living there, for sitting on it. It's a safe investment and it's pretty hands-off. So that's why, you know, people like to buy property. There's a handful of reasons, but the appreciation and the investment part of it, that's a huge positive. So sometimes people are living here and say they're ready to invest $500,000. You can buy something pretty nice in another area, but in Vancouver, you're barely getting into anything. That's just the truth of it. So if people aren't tied down to an area, why not make that $500,000 go a little farther and explore other areas, maybe in Canada? Me, I just love living here. So that is the option that I'm choosing. It'll still be a good investment. You just might not get as much house. And for a growing family, sometimes that's what they're looking for. So they look elsewhere. See, it all comes back to if you make enough money, you can make it work right here. If you're wondering how much house you could afford here in Vancouver, send me an email below this video. I'll get a couple details from you and we'll kind of give you an idea of what what is out there. Use us as a free resource. I answer all my emails. And number 3, something people love talking about. They love it. They love talking about in Vancouver is the weather. The important thing to note, okay, the most important part is that the weather in Vancouver is not intense. And what I mean by that is like the summers don't get too hot, the winters don't get too cold. Summers, maximum 40 degrees Celsius. A lot of the time it doesn't even get that hot. In the winters, -5 Celsius, below freezing, but it's nothing compared to some places like Calgary, like we were saying. That's like too cold for me. I'm not interested. I'm not interested. Doesn't sound that bad then, right? So why do people, what's the problem with the weather? Well, we have about like 4 or 5 months of the year, I'm not gonna lie, where it gets a little bit gray and rainy. From November to February or March, a lot of the time it is raining most of the days, or it is just gray. Like the sky is just gray. It's not blue, it is overcast. Like today is gray. I'll take a quick video just to show you the average day. It's not like it's so dark or anything where it's the end of the world is coming, but you don't look outside and you're like, man, I am so ready to go play some basketball. So for people who are moving from places where it's sunny most of the time, that's a big change. For people like me, where I've lived here now for 7 years, honestly, I'm fine with it. I don't really notice it. And last thing I'll say on this point is that if you work a office job, that was the one time that it kind of hit me a little harder, because you would wake up at 7 or 8, it would be dark. You'd go to the office, it's bright during the day, you see out the windows, it's bright, and then when you come home, it's dark again, because in the winter, it gets bright at like 8 or something, like kind of later, and then it gets dark really early, before 5. So this isn't the only place that this happens. It's just that when that's combined with like, then it's the weekend and you're like ready to do stuff, but now it's raining or it's still gray, sometimes it can get to people. Those are the top 3 reasons people decide that Vancouver may not be for them or their future plans. The setting here is amazing. All of the mountains, the ocean right here. So again, think about the negatives from this video and some of the other videos and compare them to the positives. As mentioned, use this as a resource, a free resource for any of your Vancouver questions below this video.